Well, we should be live. Are we live? Yes, we are live. Okay, so welcome, people. Today we're going to talk about the left, the minimum wage, and politics. And it's a topic we've been having earlier. I mean, we talked about the whole concept of a minimum wage before, but this time we will have the added, how do you call it, joke that Bernie Sanders, one of the main advocates for minimum wage, kind of screws over his own campaign workers when it comes to minimum wage. And there is some lovely irony in it, to be honest. I am joined today by John. I have asked people if they want to join. Vincent Veritas from Direwolf might join later. Other than that, I don't know who will come. I don't know how fast we start talking about the beauty of minimum wages. I'd like to say thank you for joining us, Anirtak and Ludicrous and Michael Keller. Always fun to have people right from the start. Have your govs also imposed some save up water rules like don't shower every day? Not yet. So, but yeah, that might be coming, considering today was 39 degrees Celsius, which means that, well, basically they tell people not to take their dogs on a walk if the dog has to walk on asphalt, because the asphalt will be at 50 degrees and it's actually damaging your dogs. This sort of weather is one of the reasons to have shoes for your pets. I'm not even joking.
Yeah. But in Britain, we have what they call hosepipe bans, which is official restrictions on the use of water. Where I live, it's not particularly about how hot it gets, because they have this cunning plan. What it is I live in a corner of England that is furthest from the prevailing wind, so we get the least rain. And so we don't have enough water. So what do? They keep building more houses and so having more people, even though we don't get any more water. It's amazing, really. But we have it many years. We have hosepipe bans. So, yeah.
Well, indeed, John. And it's kind of funny, Michael Keller, as you said, even though we have water shortage, the Rhine and Lake Constance have high water. And therein lies the problem. Now, the good thing is the Netherlands is below water level. I have never heard that the Netherlands had a shortage of water. But I find it very disconcerting or difficult to understand that countries bordering the sea have a water shortage problem.
Yeah, I must admit, that does puzzle me. I was thinking about that earlier.
Well, I mean, desalination, we know how to do it. We know how to desalinate large scales of water.
Well, if you consider that the Thames is supposedly drunk 8 times down its length, and so we have a very complex purification process.
Fair enough.
Surely desalination is relatively simple in comparison.
Well, let's say it's as difficult. Then still it's doable. It's what it's about drinking water, springs that gets. Well, I mean, Michael Keller, in your case, I can understand that because Switzerland is a little bit landlocked, just a bit. But countries like the UK or the Netherlands or indeed South Africa, these are countries that never should have water problems.
Yeah.
But somehow.
Though to be fair, you see, I mean, one of the problems in the UK is, so we've got regions that are very water rich, and they're the unpopulated ones, and we have heavily populated areas without enough water. And it's not the problem of the amount of water in total for the country, it's where it's situated and the economics of transporting it.
Which I don't understand, because let's be honest, it's not that difficult to make pipelines.
No, I mean, I was just watching some in the Tour de France. I keep seeing these beautiful Roman aqueducts.
Yeah.
But hey, you're talking about British government here.
Hi there, Nick. Welcome to join, mate. But yeah, it's amazing that the Romans were able to make sure that everywhere there would be water. And in this current day and age, we have a problem with it. And people are drinking from the Thames. Well, not literally, obviously, but it is. The Thames is one of the sources for drinking.
Well, yeah, it's the source of water. And if you saw some of the other rivers flowing in through into London, they make the Thames look like the cleanest water on the planet.
Anitak, I'm sorry, my dear. I appreciate your influence. I appreciate everything you say. But no, if I'm to choose between wet, icy stuff or this sweltering heat, trust me.
No. She's saying she prefers a desert type of cold over snow.
I disagree.
You prefer?
I prefer snow.
Okay.
This is again the water thingy. I mean, if you look at places like the desert, where it can be really cold, let's be honest, nighttime.
Well, I mean, and there is a cold desert, at least one, the Gobi.
Well, therefore, I still prefer snow and wet stuff, because that way there will be at least some life and something to drink. There is that. And snow isn't dry. Come on. Snow melts too. And hi there, Real Raven, by the way.
Sorry about the clickety-clack. It's too much fun.
Indeed, Nick, water does have nothing to do with the minimum wage. It's just some banter we started with because we didn't know how many people were here. But it's quite full at the moment. I did invite a few people to help.
I have invited Nick in the chat, but he hasn't responded.
Well, he's welcome to join as well.
Well, an American perspective on an American topic.
Yeah. Well, it's not an American topic, is it?
Bernie Sanders, American minimum wage. I think that's a very American topic. I mean, yes, it's more general, but...
What I wanted to say. And I did invite a few people. I know Vincent Veritas said, Vincent Veritas is from Direwolf Entertainment. He said he might join us later, so I hope he will. I did invite Don the Pleb because I'd like his point of views on the financial side of things. I'm pretty sure he might have something interesting to say, but unfortunately I haven't heard back from him. Actually, there's a lot of people I haven't heard back from, which is unfortunate, but then again, it's also my fault. I'm not blaming these people, because as usual, I start organizing these things roughly an hour before I go live, which might be a little bit late. I understand that. Just might. I mean, but anyway, do we want to start talking now, or do we say let's?
Well, we have a very, very healthy audience for so early on into the stream. That's what I'd say.
That's absolutely true.
Before they get bored and bugger off.
I have the same problem when I was sending out job applications. I just never heard back from anyone.
Yeah, that's the thing with jobs, though, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, spruce up a bit of the funny stuff. I used to work at a prison, so in every application I sent since, and I only sent 3, fair enough, I always put in that I also worked as a work coach in prison, because that's interesting. So they're going to invite you just to figure out, oh, okay, so what's that like? That might not get you the job, but at least it gets you to round 2. I thought you were already talking, must be imagining things. Yeah, Real Raven, that's the thing, mate. You really got to stop with the funny, the wacky tobacco, because we're not talking about the topic yet, Real Raven. Ah, well, John already typed it. And yeah, I like Dire Wolf as well. They had me as a guest some time ago. They probably never have me as a guest again. I don't know. That's completely neither here nor there. Anyway, so the idea was, let's talk about the minimum wage. And why is this minimum wage thing so interesting? Because at this point in time in America, there is an, how do you call it, election thing going on. And the different campaigns are paying their staffers what they're not paying the minimum wage, which is maybe to be expected. But it's funny that presidential campaigners that are very, very strong about, oh yes, there should be a minimum wage, aren't paying minimum wage to their staffers. The double standard in that is kind of one of the things we're going to talk about. And I still think it's interesting to talk about whether a minimum wage is indeed a good thing to have.
Yeah, but can we poke fun first? Before we get onto that topic, I want to poke fun, because that's the whole point. The point is the funny how these people advocate for things, but strangely never think it applies to them.
And this is indeed a great example of the hypocritical left.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not just the hypocritical left. I think all people are hypocritical, but in this case, it's the left being hypocritical. Let's advocate for this, that, and the other. Yay! What do you mean I have to do it too?
But that's the funny thing. I mean, the hypocrisy on the left is
well, the problem, Real Raven, is you end up with a problem if you do not do anything to guard against the drive to the bottom of wages. You end up with situations like children being tied to their desks in factories with a bucket to shit in. At some point, you have to say, no, there's a minimum. You have to apply a minimum. Because, you know, you bring in enough immigrants and they will drive the wage down enough, and then no one can afford to live. And I'll give you an example of this, okay? Right, so I work for the construction industry. And we had lots and lots of East Europeans. And those East Europeans worked like mad. When they were here, they'd be here for, say, 6 weeks. And they would work at least 6 days a week, every hour God sends, and they would barely rest. And then they'd bugger off for a few weeks back to their home countries, which is fine. Nothing wrong with any of that. However, they can do it because they're not, the companies that don't employ them, they just contract them. They only pay them for the hours they work. And the problem is that if you've got a British person with a life, with family responsibilities, they can't do that. And so you actually, what you've got is, yes, you've got a lovely free market for wages, but it's not the same for everyone. Because if you've got your kids' football practice every Wednesday night, you've got to go to your kids' football practice every Wednesday night. And people would say things like this. The British people would say, look, I can't do that. I can't work those hours because I've got this, I've got that, I've got the other. Now, the employer is like, well, we'll have them lovely immigrant workers who will work every hour God sends. Because that's their interest. And so it's not as simple as just saying, oh, well, just let the market decide.
And the worst part is you can't let the market decide because the market didn't decide to open up the gates to let in so many people.
Exactly.
So, but even though this is a very interesting topic, and we're going to touch on that in a moment, I want to go back to, is minimum wage populist or just retarded? And I'm going to say minimum wage is both populist and just retarded. But the main reason we brought this up is because, as we said earlier, people like Bernie Sanders, who have been calling out for minimum wages for as long as I can remember, refuses to pay minimum wages to his campaign staffers. So there's one rule for thee and one rule for me.
Yeah.
And no one seems to recognize this. Well, I mean, there are people talking about it, but it doesn't change the point of view, because the people who are against Bernie Sanders see this as confirmation on why they're against Bernie Sanders. But the people who are in favor of Bernie Sanders don't really seem to see this as a reason to say, okay, let's get rid of Bernie Sanders then, because we can't trust him. And it's kind of double. I remember I've seen Tim Pool talk about it, and basically Tim Pool said, well, I understand why he did it, because if Bernie Sanders is the only one paying minimum wage, his campaign will suffer from it. And I'm like, that's
welcome to economics
argument, actually.
Welcome to economics. Welcome to the fundamental problem with these things.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, he does seem to understand some of the problem behind it. The thing is, what is the price of an hour's work?
Well, value.
What's the value of an hour's work, indeed? Because money isn't a good indicator of value.
But this comes down to the same argument we discussed with the women sports people. You have to earn the money that you pay somebody. If they are not providing labor to that value, you're not going to employ them.
Well, there is that, and I like it. Actually, Bernie is paying them now, but now because he's paying them, he's cutting their hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's the problem. That's the problem with minimum wage. The more you demand people to pay minimum wage, the more they will cut the hours of people working for them, because it has to come from somewhere.
And well, that's not the only or even the major problem with minimum wage. The main problem with minimum wage is, if you have a scale of people earning money, then for everyone who's below your level, say $15, they're still not all earning the same amount. Now, do you make everybody who's currently at $15 and all those below $15 suddenly earn $15? Then the lower value of those jobs become as attractive to the employee as the higher value of those jobs.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, it's like we have this in the UK, where supermarkets have been taken to court for paying the checkout operators who sit in a nice warm shop the same as warehouse workers who have heavy lifting and can work in the cold and whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Because somehow that's equivalent work. Well, the problem is that if you do that, who's going to go work in the warehouse? If they're being paid the same amount, you might as well just go and sit in the shop. And this is the fundamental problem with it. If you raise the most basic job to $15, you then have to pay a premium for everything that isn't quite a basic job. So in other words, you just instituted a shitload of wage inflation.
And the funny thing is that the only people who are benefiting from minimum wages are owners. Now, I own my own house. So if they're going to inflate the value of money, or deflate the value of money hugely, that would be in my interest. Now, why would that be in my interest? Well, I have a mortgage, and that mortgage is based on a set amount. If money is devaluated, so all of a sudden I'm earning twice as much money as I earn now, even though the value in bread is the same, yeah, well, but the mortgage will go down because I have a mortgage payment set on the amount, not on the value.
Yeah. So
devaluating money is actually in favor of me. I mean, I don't mind that happening.
Yeah.
Funny thing is,
this is the irony of inflation, because the United Kingdom during the 70s and 80s had very high inflation, averaging about 10%. And that is exactly what happened. People would buy a house And inflation would make it so that it was next to nothing in a few years to pay off the mortgage.
Yeah.
And so from the home buyer's point of view, that was a good thing. But we had all this fuss from Thatcher. Oh, we've got to cut inflation. We've got to cut inflation. Inflation's bad. Okay. So then finally in the 1990s, John Major started to get a grip on inflation and got it down to no more than 2% year on year. And Labour, under Gordon Brown as Chancellor, maintained that. So we had a decade at 2%. What do they complain about? Oh, interest rates are too low. No one wants to invest. Okay, make your mind up. Which is it? Is high inflation bad or low inflation bad?
I would say
you can't have them both. No, but my point wasn't this. It was that they complained when it was one way, and then they complained when it was the other way. Make your fucking minds up.
The people that complained are the ones investing. Because if I loan money to invest, and then a massive wave of inflation happens, my investment stays valuable, but because of inflation, my loan is less.
Yeah.
So the people that have are basically gaining because of inflation. But the people that have not, I mean, if you rent your house and inflation comes, well, good luck, mate, but your house just got more expensive because it's rent and it goes up every year. I mean, I have a decently big house. It's not huge, but it's decently big. My brother rents a house which isn't even half the size of my house. And at this point in time, he pays more in rent per month than I pay in mortgage. And it's not a little bit more, it's nearly double. Now, how could that happen? It could happen because of inflation. And didn't the European financial crisis in 2008 accelerate this because many here took up short-time credits, cheap credits to repay the mortgages, and so the bank lost even more income sources? Not really. The financial crisis was more created because of faulty bank products which collapsed the financial system.
No, it wasn't. It was a political correctness policies in the United States, where they were essentially, there were these two funny names. Sorry, I can't remember them. I never can.
And the Fannie Mae, but they weren't the only ones.
No, but they were at the core of it, and they were encouraged to give home loans to people who could not possibly repay it. They were called toxic debts. Then for some reason, banks started to trade bundles of toxic debt to each other in essentially a Ponzi scheme, whereby a bank would buy it and then not hope to cash it in because there was no hope of that, but to sell it onto a different bank for a profit.
Yeah.
It was all just a big con, and then we all ended up paying for it.
Yeah.
Yay!
This didn't happen just in America. This happened all over the Western world, and it's kind of funny because there's only one country in the world that actually dealt with it correctly, and that was Iceland. Basically, Iceland said, "We're not going to save the banks. Fuck the banks. The ones that did it are criminals. We're going to send them to jail." And they did. They were the first country out of the financial crisis. We are still in it. And Doc, if you can live happily in your caravan, you are a dwelling owner.
Yeah. But she's saying she doesn't want to live in it in winter.
Well, that's true. That is true. Then you need a better caravan. And hi there, Carlos. The thing is, inflation only favors the wealthy, and deflation only favors the poor. So when a lot of deflation is happening, the wealthy don't like it, or rather, the investors don't like it.
And yet it was the party of the wealthy who pushed for low inflation. And this is what I'm saying. It's like,
yeah, true that, because there are people of wealth who recognize. I mean, if we look at the Conservative Party, which is considered to be a party of the wealthy,
now they're just considered the party of goodness knows, the frigging mentally retarded.
Mentally retarded indeed. The thing is, they once were considered the party of the wealthy, but they were also looking, well, they should have also been looking at the best interests for the country.
Well, they claim to. You see, the irony is in Britain, the Conservative Party is derived from the Tory Party, and the Tory Party was actually, they had a paternalistic attitude. They believe that the elites rule, but they rule in the interests of everybody. So you don't give them filthy plebs the vote because they don't know what to do with it, but you have a responsibility as somebody of significance, of standing, to act impartially in everyone's interest, which just happens to mean you do well as well. But hey, that's one.
But they were more in favor of everyone doing well.
Well, yeah, because they had as a rule, there was a connection between, in the old societies, between the local lord and the community, who they often employed a great number of, would know personally and so forth. So there was a very strong bond.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, they wouldn't act against those people. Where it all went wrong was when we had cities form and a massive industrial working class, and then the people in power couldn't give a shit about those people because they didn't know them, understand them, or anything else.
Yeah. And I still don't understand that there are people who are actually advocating for inflation. I mean, I can understand the wealthy doing it, because the best way for a rich person to become richer is the devaluation of money, because the goods he has still hold value, and that value will go up if the price of money goes down. So I don't understand that there are poor people out there who are in favor of inflation, because all it does is kill your perspectives.
Yeah, but mainly because most people are brainwashed into telling what they can think, not actually understanding the topic directly.
That is true.
But no, I was thinking about this more generally. So Thatcher, and after her Reagan, because Thatcher came into office before Reagan, they did a fundamental alignment of economic policy in government.
Mm-hmm.
It went from monetary to forget. Anyway, one policy to another. Anyway, and so this is how I've been thinking about it. If you are too far one way, like with the Keynesian economics prior to Thatcher,
Mm-hmm.
you could be in a bit of a bind. And so if you have someone come in and say, no, we should do X, and then they do X and it makes an improvement, because frankly, anything would be an improvement. And then people go, oh, yes, that's right. That's what we need to do. But what they're mistaking is the benefits of the adjustment for benefits of being a purist in that approach. And it's the same with inflation. If you have perpetually high inflation, there are downsides to that. So you improve it by reducing inflation, and then you don't have inflation, and there are downsides to that, which you can improve by having some inflation. You with me? It's like, because everything has pros and cons, and people mistake a correction from where you are and the improvements that brings in the short term with, therefore, that's what we should do absolutely forever.
Well, in all fairness, there is no I'm sorry, I have to rephrase that. I don't see any pros to inflation, to be honest.
Well, as you said, there are people who, it depends on the dynamics. That's the point. As a homeowner in the 70s and 80s in the United Kingdom, it was brilliant. You bought a house
for the wrong reasons.
No, I'm not disputing that, mate. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying everything's a matter of perspective, and it's not saying society is the whole benefit. I'm saying there are people who can benefit, and if you change it, then there are other people who can benefit. But what you don't get is something where everyone benefits because it swings and roundabouts. That was what I was trying to get at.
No, that's true. That's true.
You know, and it's this befuddled thinking that somehow you can enact a policy and everyone's better off for it. Because, you know, there aren't policies in economics, whatever, where everyone's better off.
Well, the thing is, if you want to make a society that's better for everyone, you kind of don't want inflation, because therein the value of your labor remains the same. But if you have a country where you have lots of labor, basically you're not deflating money, you're deflating the value of your labor, because that's what money is.
Yeah. And this is part of the problem, though, isn't it? It's a multi-dimensional issue. And you can't just look at, say, inflation, because you have to then combine that with population flows, with the amount of economic activity, the nature of economic activity, and so forth. It's not as simple as just look at the value of your currency.
And Michael Keller, you think of inflation as in before fiat money terms, and that's not really true, because even with fiat currency, inflation is a big deal. Yes, it can be reverted. You can devalue or revalue money pretty fast, but that will always harm your economy.
Well, and the irony is, the European Union is a distinct action against that.
Yeah.
Because they've tied everybody's money together. And different parts of the European Union are not going to perform economically in the same way. And so what happens when the southern countries would prefer at that point to revalue? Oh no, they're stuck with whatever the Germans are doing.
Yeah.
And so you can't revert necessarily if you're in a large economic currency union.
And the downside, even when you're reverting, actually you're not really reverting. What you're saying is, okay, we're going to reevaluate. But you're going to reevaluate based on the new standards. So poor people will still stay poor in that, and they still won't be able to gain as much as the rich people do.
Well, surely poor people not gaining as much as rich people is just a function of being poor and rich, respectively.
Well, yes, but the whole idea of labor is that you could earn your way up. But inflation kind of prevents that from happening. Or I wouldn't say prevent, but it gives it an extra hurdle to make it happen. I mean, if this is kind of funny, because this is something I researched during my education. So this is 20 years ago, and it's still true today. Roughly a third of your money goes to your housing and your facilities, your living, etc., etc. A third of your money goes to food, and the rest of the money goes to luxuries and is for saving, roughly. Yep. Now, we've seen inflation happen, but we still see that those three things for a long time weren't touched. But if you look at people living in rented houses, it's a bigger problem, because people who own their house, they are still paying roughly the same balances. But people who rent their houses are paying more. And the first thing it comes out of are luxuries, but the second thing it comes out of are your primary needs, like food. And we've seen in the Western world, in Europe, we've seen an amazing growth of food banks.
Mm.
And I mean, they call them food banks because it sounds cool, but they're not banks. They're basically aid structures. And I'm not going.
Yeah, well, that's why they say bank, because bank, 4 letters, easy to say, 1 syllable, aid structure.
Yeah. But in all fairness, the fact that we had this amazing growth in these food banks shows us that the inflation is literally destroying every part of society.
Well, no. I'm sorry, because we've had massive growth in food banks. And as I said, since the early 1990s, we've not had high inflation. And so you cannot lay that at the door of high inflation. You can only put it at the door of increased economic inequality. And the fact that in a free market, the bottom has a seller of 0.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's not really true, because we also see people in the middle class becoming dependent on food banks.
Yeah, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same economic inequality, mate. You know, you don't get spared because you're in this middle class. You get spared if you can be in an occupation that doesn't suffer the tribulations of the market.
Well, but there's another problem. I mean, another thing that minimum wage, or indeed predetermined wages, do is they will find other ways to try and save on money. Now, we see, for example, in the Bernie Sanders campaign, this is what Nick said a moment ago, they are now paying that $15 minimum. But on the other hand, people get less hours.
So in other words, they're not actually paying them anymore.
No, they're paying them.
No, they're not paying them anymore. So if you were paying someone $100, you're still paying them $100. It's just for a different number of hours.
Yeah.
You know, and no, I mean, again, because I worked in the construction industry, there was a big push a few years ago to make employers responsible for the pensions of their employees. And so, as I mentioned, in construction, most people aren't employees, they're contractors. That was how they got round it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to pay things like pensions for employees, just don't employ anyone. Contract them instead.
Yeah, and this is something that we see an increase. Hell, even in the Netherlands, we see a huge increase in that, which is really, really weird. Because now in the Netherlands we have this ZZP, which is self-employed single person companies,
Mm-hmm.
and they rent themselves out to companies where they work, which is basically a way around working contracts. Well, they get a little bit more money, but they're cheaper because they're easier to get rid of for companies.
I mean, that seems to operate basically like people who work on contracts set themselves up as their own private company. It sounds similar to what we've done here for a long time.
It is. But at the same time, the government is recognizing that there's a huge problem with that. Because a lot of these ZZP'ers, these self-employed people, aren't taking precautions. I mean, part of the money of our salary goes to our welfare state. ZZP'ers need to pay that themselves.
Yeah.
And certain insurances, they have to arrange for themselves. But they don't, because it's expensive.
Yeah.
Which is okay, as long as everything goes well. But as soon as something happens that they are in dire need of the financial safeties, well, they're fucked. And with that, other people, because in a society, everyone suffers if some suffer.
Well, not everyone, but many.
Many. Well, fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, no, and I mean, but this is the fundamental problem, because if you try and legislate, oh, employers should do this, that, and the other. Well, the fact is, employers haven't got any more money.
Well, and that's the thing, because if we look, for example, in the Netherlands or in America, what happens when minimum wages go up? More people lose their job.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing you haven't mentioned, which we've seen a lot here, is companies, large companies, will contract with an agency, and then they'll employ people for years, but only as temps.
Yeah.
So they're doing a full-time job, but for temp money.
Yep. And some temps, because I used to work as a temp for a long time, and in certain cases, it's actually because I worked as a temp in healthcare. Oh, fucking hell, for the job I'm doing, they're jumping for joy when a man comes in. So I could make stupid money. Actually, me accepting the contract created a situation where I would actually lose financially. Because now I was only allowed to work 32 hours, whereas I used to work easily double that with roughly the same pay per hour. But okay, I was getting older, so working half the time wasn't bad. But at the same time,
it seems a big jump, if you don't mind me saying. I mean, like,
it was.
One's too much, but the other's like, oh, right, so we'll go to the other extreme.
Well, as a temp agent, you can decide yourself how many hours you work. But
no, I know, but you with me? It's like, yeah. But yeah. No, sorry, I was just musing on the figures you gave. That was all.
Yeah, well, it is kind of double, and I understand what you're saying, and I understand Nick as well. By the way, I used to work as a temp for a long time. Seems ironic, but at the same time, it kind of shows you the problems that forced vacations and forced pay create.
Well, yeah. Or to put it another way, just the bureaucratic overhead of having a full-time employee. It makes it very attractive to companies to outsource that to somebody else, and then that somebody else has to take a cut, and the person losing out is the person doing the actual work.
Yeah.
And so measures put in place for the supposed benefit of the person doing the job end up hurting the person doing the job.
Yeah.
Because all bureaucracy and added costs are a bad thing.
And it's funny. It's funny because they keep making the same steps and it always turns out the same, and they never understand why. And everyone explains it to them and they double down.
And this is why government is bad and top-down things are horrible.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'm thinking.
I drank my wine. There wasn't a lot of it. I drank most of it last night, so I'll be away a minute to get some beer.
I haven't even opened my bag of chips yet. Crisp chips. I don't know bloody English. Yeah, that's the funny thing, though. And if we look at how minimum wages will affect, it's always the money lenders that want inflation. They need a constant growth of inflation because otherwise they won't make as much money. Okay, let's see. Anything goes wrong, as Mod said, the contract is stuffed. Yep. No. So the wage earner often ends up with more in the bank than the contractor.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, the wage earner of the self-employed wage earners, they might have more money, but they also have more risks.
Well, I mean, I remember. See, trouble is, it's all to do with dynamics. So I worked in IT for a long time, and people used to talk about going self-employed as a contractor, because when there aren't a lot of contractors, their flexibility commands a premium, and so it was a good thing. When there are a lot of contractors, the employer ends up in the privileged position, and therefore the amount of pay goes down. And so this is the fundamental problem. People, you can't look at something like, oh, I'm going to be a contractor, and know anything about it until you look at the specifics of a given time in a given industry. And it may change. What starts off as a great situation, enough people come in, the amount you can get paid goes down, and all of a sudden it's a worse situation. But where it's possible, because as I said, in construction, it's not possible to work for as an employee. The employers don't want to know. But in computing, you had a mixture. And so the question is, do you take the low risk full-time employee route, or the high risk become a contractor route? And basically that's what it's about. It's about risk.
And it's a risk people should be free to take, let's be honest. But there is a problem.
Free to take, but not forced to take.
Yeah. And therein lies the problem, because we have gone into welfare state so far that now the wealthy can take whatever risk they want, because
they get bailed out.
Yeah, if they win, they gain, and if they lose, they get bailed out.
I mean,
and therein lies.
Yeah, it's that which is the problem. It's the fact
that's the problem.
You know, if that. Well, I mean, I say this about bankers. People complain about governments. Well, governments don't spend their own money. Well, neither do bankers. Bankers risk your money.
Yeah.
And that's the fundamental problem with them. That's why banks are so untrustworthy.
Yeah. Well, they used to be Well, that's not true either. There used to be a time when banks were more trustworthy.
No, they were trusted, but they weren't more trustworthy. It's just people were more naive, I would argue.
No, there were more laws pertaining the things they were allowed to do.
Yeah, but that doesn't make the people trustworthy. It just means they were constrained.
Well, fair enough. Nothing wrong with that. That's the thing. I mean, I'm a great proponent for laissez-faire economics, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have some restraints, which sounds counter. Well, actually, it isn't.
Yeah, no, because, okay, so I have a fundamental problem with laissez-faire economics, which has nothing to do with the principles of it, but purely to do with the practice of it. Because we live in a world economy. And so, for instance, suppose you've got a steel industry and you don't impose tariffs. But there are other countries, let's say China or India, who do have tariffs. So one-sided laissez-faire itself doesn't work. But worse, they overproduce and dump their steel in your economy, which then wipes out your industry.
Yeah.
All because you are engaging in laissez-faire economics and they are not.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental flaw of laissez-faire economics. It only works when it is mutual.
Yeah. That is true, and that's also why an open market or an open market of labor only works when all rules apply to everyone. But they don't. I mean, if we bring in cheap labor from outside, then the cheap labor from inside our society is going to be negatively impacted, especially if that cheap labor from outside is both cheap in labor costs, but are also secured of income because of the welfare state. That means that the poor workers of the country pay double. They lose the chance of, they lose their jobs, and the chance of them losing their fair income grows, and the money that they paid in taxes are being paid to import the people to whom they lose their money.
Yeah.
So, I can't understand that there are people who are actually in favor of that.
Because they aren't people who are affected by it. That's the trouble. The people advocating for open borders are your middle class parasites anyway.
Yeah, you know, the worst part is this is true in England. This is true in the UK. But this isn't true in for example, in the Netherlands. This isn't true, for example, in America. There are poor people who are actually advocating for this.
Yeah, but there are also a lot of immigrants who are against more immigration. So
yeah,
it's more complicated than that.
That's true. That's true. That's true. It's amazing that people. I mean, I've mentioned this many a time before when the Cologne attacks happened in Germany in 2016. The very next day there were refugees protesting to ask the police to crack down hard on the criminals. Didn't hear that.
No, of course not.
If we look at America, black people, Hispanic people in America are actually calling for strong immigration laws because they see that their position is being weakened. You don't hear that. No, but you do hear people shouting out, "Oh no, we should let in everyone." Yeah, but no, because the more people you let in, the more people get harmed by it. And hi there, Mycroft. So there is an amazing double standard when it comes to things like minimum pay, minimum wage, and how best to aid a country. And indeed, there is a difference between immigrants who came to build a life in the Western world for whatever reason, or the ones that came to get pampered. And the difference between them is pretty big. And this is why I keep saying I'm not an ethno-nationalist. I am not saying that some people are better than other people, but I am claiming that we shouldn't let everyone in. And if we let people in, they should themselves earn their pay. They should themselves earn their keep. Because if they don't, if they live off of the government's money, which basically is our money, we are both preventing them from achieving, and we are destroying our society from the outside in. Well, from the inside out as well, because it's the government's doing this. And in the end, everyone loses.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we look at it from a minimum wage point of view, it's double. I said the stream to one.
Well, I mean, if you look at, they say, oh, the West is so racist. If you look at the experiences of so many immigrants from places like India in the United Kingdom, they have done really well by coming here, settling in and working hard. Surely that is how it's supposed to be, not come here en masse, claim lots of benefits, breed like rabbits, and then protest the culture that has enabled all that. To be a little hyperbolic, but not too much.
I'm sorry, I missed half of that.
That's all right. Oh, I invited Mycroft in. I've sent him a link.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. People are welcome to join. But yeah, no, the problem with minimum wages, to get back to that point, is that in the end, I mean, I can understand the concept of a minimum wage, but it only works if you have a limited amount of labor and a limited amount of work. But if you bring in people from outside, you do not have a limited amount of labor. And use public funds to visit the places you fled for. Yes, this is actually happening in Europe. There are actually people who came to this country as refugee and then go on holiday in the countries they are officially still asking refuge from. You can't make this sort of shit up. If someone would write a book and the plot would be around people who fled to another country to be safe and then go home to celebrate their holidays in the countries they fled from, everyone would hate that book because it's so fucking unrealistic. If it weren't for the fact that this is actually happening. If I had employees, I would be for minimum wage. Everyone only gets the bare minimum. That'll save me. Yeah, that's the problem as well with minimum wage. Now, the idea about minimum wage is that even if you would employ it, what will you employ it on? And what you then get is that other jobs are being compared to minimum wage. For example, I have a decently highly educated job. Therefore, I earn a certain amount of money per hour, which is 1.5, 2 times minimum wage. Yeah, I don't care. But if you raise minimum wage, will that then automatically raise my wage? Now, the answer to that is very often no, which means that by raising the minimum wage, you don't only inflate the money for people at the bottom, but you inflate money for everyone. So, for example, I told you the third system, a third for housing, a third for food, and a third for luxuries. If the money inflates, that changes for people with a higher income as well. And hi there, Mycroft. Welcome on the stream.
Hi. Sorry, you were just like in the middle of a sentence there, but hi, how you doing?
Welcome, mate. Well, I'm doing all right. This is an interesting topic to me, to be honest. I think the most.
Well, are you still talking about minimum wage?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea.
Well, it amazes me time and time again how people can be in favor of it, and maybe I was at a certain point in time as well, because we've all been young, we've all made mistakes.
The problem is it's a crude top-down attempt to solve a genuine problem, and like all crude top-down attempts to do anything, it fails.
Well, no, there's like a million ways you can prove this to be like a terrible idea. I can think of 3 right off the top of my head. Number one, raising wages is just simply in any particular area is simply just going to drive up costs for everybody around them, and then they're just going to end up paying more for the goods and services that they're needing to survive, and therefore the raise in wage means absolutely fucking nothing. Another issue with the raise of the wage is that if you raise the wage, then guess what? Employers are just simply not going to hire as many people. That, or they may actually lay off people because it's too expensive to hire them into the positions in the first place.
Well, yeah, but you see, here's my fundamental problem is, as an employer, you should only be employing people to do work you need doing. And so if you can afford to not employ people, why were you employing them in the first place?
Because it was cheap enough to employ them. Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying. But if they're not doing anything of value, why are you employing them?
No, they were doing enough. They were doing something of enough value for the price that you were paying them. But
yeah,
at
but
some
complicated calculation.
At some point, they no longer retain that same level of like. Like, for example, I'm not going to pay some guy to flip burgers for $20 an hour, right? If that's going to cost me money in my company, as opposed to putting that same person up for $10 an hour if I can get away with it.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? Okay, because the fundamental problem with the value of money is everything's relative.
Yeah.
So if you have to pay somebody $10 for the burgers, but everyone else pays 10, clearly it's not viable. If everyone has to pay $20 for the burgers, then perhaps it is necessary to raise the price of the burgers, in which case the market will reduce. However, that is the complex thing with all these things in economics, is that there are no absolutes. Everything is just relative to everything else.
You're kind of working backwards there, though. I mean, the prices are not top down, they're bottom up. So basically, anything that you do in the market has a bottom up price. So basically,
yeah, that's what I said. No, that is what I'm saying. I'm saying, if you're having to pay more for your labor, your prices go up. Your costs have gone up, so you have to raise the price. And therefore, the demand will go down. That's the way it works. If you have a cost, an unavoidable cost, and it suddenly increases, the price of the product must go up.
No. No, it doesn't. Your price doesn't have any effect on demand.
Of course it does.
No, I mean, like the demand is constant. It's
no,
just
it's
simply
not.
it's simply.
Don't you know about demand curves?
No. It simply depends on the. You're talking about whether somebody's actually going to purchase or not. That's different. Demand
that's your demand. That's what they call demand in economics.
That's the problem. When you raise the minimum wage, you basically say all prices will go up.
Yeah, you raise your costs, and therefore you must raise the price, and therefore you go down the demand curve. That is what happens. The question is, and it's complicated. This is my whole point. It's complicated because here's what used to happen in the UK. All these unions would say, we want a 20% wage rise. And so they get a 20% wage rise. So that would impact on inflation. And all the other unions would go, we want a 20% wage rise. Yeah, so the whole floor raised by 20%. No one was actually any better off. It's just all prices were now 20% higher, but people were worse off. That is those on a fixed income.
Yeah. Okay, so hang on a sec. When we're talking, when we're talking demand, are we talking static goods? Or are we talking just
no, demand? When you sell a product, there are people who might buy it. How much they buy will depend on the price. That is the demand curve. All products have a demand curve.
Well, sure. If you're talking, well, it depends on what product.
No, this is basic economics. I learned it at 16 in school. When you tell a product,
I know what you're talking about. But this is the thing: it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about something that people need, when it's something like water.
Okay.
That has a different shaped demand curve, but each product has its own demand curve.
But let me be as kind as to talk about the things we need. We need food, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. But we don't need burgers.
No, but we need food. So
we need food.
We need food. Okay. Now here's the thing with inflation. Inflation raises the price of everything. This includes food, right?
But often prices vary inequitably. Some things affect more than others.
Fair enough, but I'm going to talk about food as an example for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it raises the price of food. Okay, so inflation raises the price of food. Does it raise the price of food for everyone equally?
No, I'm sorry. Like the way that you're approaching this is just upsetting me. Like you're looking at this as like a demand side thing, and it's not. So
I'm not.
when you're looking
doing a classic economic analysis of the consequence of a rise in one of the input costs.
Yes.
It's just basic economics. I'm sorry if that upsets you, but this is how people think about these things.
Well, the problem is it's not so much how people think. This is what's actually happening.
No, I'm saying
I usually start at supply. That's where I usually start.
But supply demand is a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Demand is not.
Yeah, I mean, let's
demand is no, because here's the thing: you can have varying levels of supply, but that does not necessarily correlate with demand.
Like, and you can have varying levels of demand, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with supply. It's a feedback loop.
Depending on the product.
Yes, depending on the product. But the basic premise is if your costs go up, your price should go up. And if your price goes up, demand will drop. That is the basic premise of selling into a market.
Yeah, I'll give you. Yeah, sure. But that was
the problem with inflation is that it artificially creates a price change.
Yeah, and it's not smooth. Yeah. So different prices are stepping at different rates at different times.
And this affects everyone, not just the people who earn a minimum wage, but it affects everyone, except for the very rich, because they can, well, it affects them, but they can bear the brunt of it. But what happens, and this is, for example, why in so many countries we are seeing the destruction of the middle class. Because of inflation. And inflation... yeah, I'll get to that in a second.
I think there are other causes. I'll just say
inflation is a very huge one of them.
I think there is another dynamic that is all equally important.
Well, I mean, like inflation is consistently occurring. It just depends on how much the wages are rising alongside of that really makes the difference. You know, like for example, like in the U.S., a dime, 40 years ago was worth more than it is now. But I mean, inflation is something that consistently occurs with any currency, and it should. What matters is how the wages or the amount of income that people are actually, like the wealth that people are accruing,
the purchasing power
measures against how that inflation is occurring, right? Like inflation itself all on its own does not mean a damn thing. It just the only reason that we care about that is this is like what that allows people to actually purchase, like you said, purchasing power.
Well, it's more complicated, and you probably didn't hear my discussion earlier about the history in Britain, where for decades we had very high inflation, and there was a priority to reduce it, and then once we reduced it, then suddenly they realized the downside of low inflation. And it was like, be careful what you wish for, you might get it.
Well, I mean, you guys are you familiar with the concept of stagflation? Do you know what that means?
Well, yeah, I am. Yeah.
Stagnation of wages, and then inflation of.
Well, no, but I mean, it's like the Britain in the second half of the 19th century, and to a certain extent, Japan now, and Britain, to a certain extent, since we've had decades of very close to zero inflation, is depression. Inflation causes a problem of investment, and that has consequences of its own.
Well, so I hear it like recently with the UK, that's actually been resolving. The wages have actually been rising in.
No, not the wages. It's all about investment and interest rates.
Oh well, I don't know. It wasn't the IMF. I'm thinking of the ECB now, but oh God, you guys just recently dropped your interest rates.
Drop them?
Yeah, you did in Europe, not in
Oh,
Europe.
no.
In the
No, because
UK.
in the UK, basically what it is, our central bank, the Bank of England, sets the official base rate, they call it, and it was at 0.5% for years, and basically couldn't go any lower without becoming negative. And then they raised it a whole 0.25% after years. So if they've dropped it again, it's gone back to presumably 0.5%.
Well, I don't even know this actually, to be honest with you. Are you guys still running off of the ECB, or are you?
Oh, crikey, no. We're nothing to do with the ECB. No, it's Bank of England.
The Bank of England. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that they dropped rates. Well, they were talking about it anyway.
Yeah, but
well, they often talk about it.
What we want it to mean, to be honest.
But then that just means that there's not movement in the market, so that means that well, usually that will occur. Yeah, see, there you go. Current British interest rate BOE is at 0.75.
Yeah, that's a rise. It was at 0.5 until August 2018.
Yeah, and it hasn't moved since.
No, because as I say, it was at 0.5% for years. Because we have consistently low inflation. And low inflation means low interest rates, and low interest rates mean very little incentive to invest, sadly. Also, they say.
Also, they say, because that's not really true. It's listen, the higher the inflation, the higher the interest rates, it's more interesting to invest. But it's not interesting to invest with low. It's just less profitable or less easily profitable.
Well, no, the thing is that so the reason that this rate matters, I don't even know what you would call it in the EU, is that in the US anyway, the prime rate directs the rate that the banks will assign to interest rates on things like mortgage loans, and
we call it the base rate. That's what we call it, the base rate. All other rates are derived from that government set rate.
Right, and so that will direct how much people are looking to actually invest in things like real estate or things like home equity loans, things along those lines. Basically, the lower the rate, the lower the prime rate, the more likely it is that people are going to take risk, right? Mm-hmm. So they're going to take risks to like take out like a I don't know, some loan to fix up their house, or maybe they've got some debt that they want to pay off, and then they will consolidate that debt through a home equity loan or some other bullshit they might be doing. As soon as the rate starts going up, that doesn't actually mean that people are less likely to do that. It just means that they're more likely to do it at a higher rate of how do you call it? They're more likely to do it with having to pay more back to the bank, because that means the market's actually doing better. The fact that I mean, I'm looking at this this graph right now from the BOE, and this is 07. So basically, from the recession onward, you guys have kept. What is this? Is this due to the quantitative easing from the EU, or what?
What? Sorry, I can't see. You're not sharing.
Oh no, I'm not sharing it.
Therefore, I cannot comment on something you're saying. What is this? And
I'll send it to you right now. These are the this is global rates, John. Here you go. That's what I'm looking at. You can see the BOE long-term graph. You can see there right at.
Well, hang on. Give me a moment to actually load that up somewhere. I have got a graph up, but it's not. It wasn't that one. Yeah, I've got a better resolution version. I'll send you that.
Yeah, but you can see like right at 07, it drops down to where you're talking about.
Middle of 08.
Guys, can you share it so that people in the stream can also see what you're talking about?
Yeah, if you have something better than I do, then please do.
I've just linked it to you.
All right, I'm gonna look at that.
Okay, so Modwayne has asked me to share it. Give me a second, Modwayne. I'm old and slow.
Yeah, it literally dropped off right there. Now, 07 was the 07 was the financial crisis, and
08 here.
08. Now, I'm kind of wondering if the reason that these rates have been
Can
capped.
You see that, Modwayne?
I put you on broadcasting, and I can see that.
Okay, so this is when the rates dropped. That was October 2008.
And they've been capped that way since then. And the reason that I asked, I kind of wonder, like, for 6 years now? How long is this?
No, from January 2009, February 2009, until...
Almost 10 years. Well, no,
12 years. 12 years now. Well, up till up until now, really.
Well, 2009 to 2019, it was not 12 years.
Yeah, it was February 2009 until May 2018 that it was at or below 0.5%, and now it's at a whopping 0.75%. The point is, it's still below 1%, which, as you can see, is not typical historically.
No. Well, I mean, so I have to look this up now. The quantitative easing that
the British government did its own quantitative easing, but not excessively. There was more of an emphasis. In 2010, the Conservative government came to power, so that's about here. Okay, May 2010, and their emphasis wasn't on quantitative easing, it was upon
see you later, Michael.
What they call it, austerity, government cuts, and cutting debt.
So that's what's holding your rates down?
No, the low inflation is what's keeping the rates down, and a shitty economy. But hey, nothing new in the UK there.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if it's the shitty economy that's keeping the rate down, because there are people who will say, okay, we lower the interest rates for more investment, but there are also people who speak out that a higher interest rate might be good for investments as well, because that way it creates an incentive for the individual bankers to actually start loaning out more money.
Investments, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's a double. That's the thing, though. The best for any economy is a flat line. And it doesn't make sense because that's not what we've been taught. But the best for any economy is a flat line, wherein the value of money is constant. Because then people know what is what and how much it's valued at.
Well, no, like this makes sense when you're doing a recovery is to basically
Yeah.
I mean it depends.
Well, people have differing opinions. You've got the monetarists and you've got the Keynesian types.
I mean, well, I don't know.
I mean, the problem is what I was trying to say earlier. Too much going one way is likely to be a bad thing. It's all about balance. You don't want.
True.
Yeah,
I mean,
what I'm looking at here is not balanced. Like whatever.
No. I'm not saying you are seeing here balance. What the problem is the British government since the late 1970s through Margaret Thatcher set a priority of low inflation. It took them until the early 1990s to even achieve low inflation, but it has been a kind of holy grail ever since. Now, if you set a policy of low inflation, and that's what you get, and that's what's been happening, everything else becomes secondary.
This just simply looks like your bank is holding your markets. We had the same problem after.
No, because the Bank of England is set its responsibilities by the government, and the responsibility it has is to keep down inflation.
Yeah, but this isn't inflation. This is the prime rate.
Yeah,
that you're looking at here.
And that is its tool. That's the tool it has.
Yeah.
So you've got a directive to keep down inflation and a tool of interest rates and money supply. They're the two tools it's got: interest rates and money supply.
Yeah, but this is the amount of,
and this is the interest rate half of that.
Yeah, you're talking about how much a bank can actually charge back towards itself after lending money, right? So, like, the idea behind this is just that you keep the interest rates low to inspire lending after a financial fall, but this has to rise eventually, because obviously the bank is going to have to recoup these costs at some point.
You are misunderstanding what the Bank of England's role is.
Yeah.
Not what it's trying to do. It is purely trying to keep down inflation. That is its job.
In all fairness, if we look at, for example, and this is kind of funny, but a lot of people don't seem to think of it this way. Well, what happens is that governments set an inflation rate, or I'm still going to say inflation rate. They allow banks to loan money at a certain interest. In America and in Europe, there has been a short period of time when there was actually a negative interest rate. So if you would loan money from the governments, they would pay you for loaning their money, because this would help you invest. So let's say that a bank could loan money for investment at 0.5%. So that's like 0.5%. So they will pay 0.5% of rent on the money they loan from government, and then those banks loan it out to individuals like me at 4 or 5%.
At what they can get, basically.
Well, if they can get 4 or 5%.
Yeah, what they can get. Then the market's operating between the cartel of banks.
Yeah, and this in itself is inflation. Because the money will be valued for a period of time as more, but then what you do with that money, when it is being paid back to the government, it's still less. So in the end, banks are creating their own money because of this, and that creates inflation. Because the more money you create, if there's less value stand against it, even with fiat money this is the case, then that value becomes, well, less, therefore the money is worth less, therefore inflation. And this can only happen because banks are given the ability to create money out of basically thin air.
Well, it's not money, it's credit. But
well, true.
That's quibbling.
I know, that is quibbling. I know you're pedantic.
Yeah, and I'm acknowledging my quibblingness.
Yes, as you should. But no, but this creates inflation. And because of this inflation, things will actually become of less worth. Now, this isn't a problem for those who own. This is a problem for those who lend. And this is a problem for those who rent.
Well, it actually says just up here, low interest rates are generally good for borrowers, but bad for savers.
Yeah.
Just I'll mention that.
But if the bank is the main borrower at low interest rates, and then they can borrow it to you at a higher interest rate, because banks will give this low interest rate, but you as an individual are not.
Well, no, that's why it's a base rate.
Yeah.
That's why it's a base rate. It's like a base.
Yeah. So at this point, the banks profit from the low interest rates, but you do not.
But banks profit and we do not for all bank transactions. That's their whole modus operandi.
Yeah, but as soon as you could start, as soon as you start at big differences, basically you're destroying your economy. And in the end, this comes down to hyperinflation, or it will come down to hyperinflation. This has not happened in the Western world yet.
It has.
It has. It hasn't happened in the west of the Western world. It has happened in the.
It happened in Germany, in the end of the Weimar Republic.
Yes. Okay. True that. True that. I was talking about the last 30 years.
No, you didn't. You just said it hasn't happened in the Western world. No, I'm saying it has happened in the Western world.
It happened a lot in Greece. It happened a lot in Italy. It has happened in Spain, if I'm not mistaken.
It happened in Zimbabwe.
Well, yeah, obviously it happened there, but I don't really consider Zimbabwe to be part of it.
No, I'm just saying. I'm now listing all places it has happened that I know.
Let me ask you guys a question. Where would you like to have the base interest rate at, and why?
Me?
Danny, either of you.
Don't give a monkey. Nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so do either of you own property?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so where would you like to have the prime, whatever the hell you call it?
It's irrelevant to me.
Okay, why?
Because I barely own anything on it.
Yeah.
I don't pay any interest.
Okay, but let's say you did.
If I did, as I say, it's like what is important is the gap between interest rates and inflation, not whatever the interest rate is. The interest rate means nothing out of context.
Okay, the right answer there is whether you're intending to keep your property or sell your property.
Well, yeah, fine, but I intend to keep my property, and therefore it is moot.
Yeah, but
so
when you sell it,
if you're gonna keep it, then where would you want the interest?
It doesn't matter because I'll be dead when it gets sold.
Okay.
Literally, do not care.
All right.
But if you're going to keep the interest rate doesn't matter, other than for taxes, I guess.
Yep.
But when you're going to sell, I guess you want to have low interest rates, because that way people could loan more money and therefore you can sell your property at a higher price. But at the same time, this is what inflation does. So it would be better for society at large if it would be basically a flat rate.
No.
1 ounce of gold is 1 ounce of gold is 1 ounce of gold is 1 ounce of gold.
No.
You can get 10 gallons of fuel, 10 gallons of fuel, or 10 gallons of fuel. The difference is that we keep changing the value of things. So
no, we don't keep changing. The value changes. It's very complicated.
No, what's going on? What's been going on in your market for the last 12 years? This whatever the hell is terrible, and you don't want this because what you want with your interest rates, right? Is you do want them to vary based on particular areas, and you do want them to vary based on what your overall market is doing. If I was to assign a particular interest rate to a particular area, I want that to be reflective of how that area is performing. The fact that this has just been flat for, I don't even know what this graph is, to be quite honest with you, but this looks fucking terrible. Is this the prime rate from your?
What is the base rate?
Yeah, this is awful. This should not exist. Everything that is happening right here is fucking terrible.
It is, as far as I'm aware, at least since the start of the 20th century, unknown.
But why is it terrible?
Well, because if I'm a bank, right, and a bank is going to say, okay, you've got, if a bank comes to me and says, okay, you have to charge at least this small amount of interest on a particular loan, whether it's a home equity loan, a mortgage, consumer loan, whatever the hell it may be, right? And this is the very base ass minimum based on the market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mycroft? Did we lose Mycroft?
I don't know. It sounded like he was leading to something.
Yeah. But now I can't hear anything.
Oh.
Nor has he responded to anything we said. So
no, maybe he's got transatlantic internet problems, issues, thingies.
Maybe.
But yeah, I mean, oh, are you back?
I heard a bit of Mycroft there.
Yeah, and then sorry, Mike, you dropped out.
Yeah, not able to hear me.
Yeah, you're roboting still a little.
Let me fix that. I'll be.
Yeah.
I think he's going to say right back, but
again, you see, this comes down to my an argument I'm forming about top-down government action is just bad in general. And this is just another aspect of it, because the more they try and control stuff, the more they fuck things up. Because you can't control things because things are too complicated.
And that's the problem with... Anyway, this is basically the socialistic thought.
So I'm going to stop screen sharing, by the way.
Sorry?
I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Yeah. There you go. I also stopped broadcasting you then. No, but this is a little bit the socialistic mindset that we can.
Central planned economy is bad.
Thank you. Yes.
And goodness knows why people haven't learned that.
Yeah, it never worked, and it hasn't ever worked. But I agree with Ludicrous as well. I mean, if the whole of Europe has the same very low interest rate, it shows that the financial market is being controlled. It's seen as static.
Yeah.
Because it should be based on demand and supply.
Yeah. But because they're set by central authorities, and setting by central authorities in the interest, like in the, as I say, I can only talk for the UK. So in the UK, the objective is low inflation.
Yeah.
Okay, but that seems a very, very one-tracked policy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, are you sure that's the best thing and the only thing you need worry about? You know?
The thing is, it started going wrong. I mean, I still learned, and can you imagine, this is 20 years ago, me training as a bookkeeper, that banks were supposed to have an amount of money equal to roughly a quarter of the outstanding loans.
Yeah.
That no longer is the case.
Oh, not even close.
So there is no supply and demand curve in it anymore. They destroyed that. And they gave banks basically a fiat to create their own money.
No, but worse, you've got government policies like with the mortgage problems that created the financial crisis in 2008, where governments pressured banks to make unsound loans for political reasons, not sound economic reasons.
Yeah.
And that is not good.
And fractional reserve banking is a pain, ludicrous. I would go one further. I would say it's a crime. And this is, for example, what led up to the financial crash, because it didn't start with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There were more banks that were already being tipped over, but most of these banks got saved. Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac were the first two banks that weren't saved. And can you imagine not saying...
No, but it was their loans, which then got passed on, which caused banks around the world.
It was well before that. I mean, it started in 2000. No, in 2008, it came to an end.
Yeah,
but there were more American banks and European banks, by the way. Germany was also very good at that. That had a lot of, how do I say this?
Toxic debt is what we call it, the official term, toxic debt.
And why was it toxic? Because they didn't have anything to balance it with.
No, well, no. It was also, no. It was toxic because they had been pressured to make loans they had no chance of recouping. That was what was toxic about it.
Well, that was true for America, but that's not true for Europe.
Yes, and that's why I talked about the American loans, because the American loans were economically unsound. You might say, oh, well, the European system itself as a whole was unsound, but to make a loan that is economically unsound is a different order of problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking up the BOE, like as far as why they were holding the rates down that low. I don't understand why they were doing that.
Don't worry. The ways of bankers are mysterious.
BOE into prime. It was that's your prime rate you were showing me, right?
Base rate. We are English. We will call it the English term.
Base rate. Whatever you want to call it.
Sorry. Part of the little fun I get in life is making fun of the differences in language between our countries.
Well, we held our rates down too. I don't remember what it was down, but we did for a long time, and then that was.
But it doesn't matter, and this is the funny thing. It doesn't matter that the base rates are being held down if you've given banks the right to create credit out of thin air.
Yeah, well, we've always done that, so.
That's not true, because if you look at banking, not even more than 30 years ago, banks were limited in the amount of money they could loan out based on how much money they actually owned.
Yeah, the ratio, the liquidity ratio.
And because of that, supply and demand was a thing even in banking. But by removing that, loans are not based on supply and demand anymore.
No, they're usually based on sales targets.
But this creates a toxicity within the financial structures that will inevitably collapse once again.
Just remember, it's not their own money.
No, well, that's okay. hang on, back up a second. Yeah, no, obviously a bank has a particular reserve that they have to play on. And if you are lending out money, regardless of what you're lending it out for, you do have a capital limit.
And this is what Modway's saying, because that concept has been massively eroded.
Not really, though.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yes, really. Banks
No.
can actually
in what, in Europe?
In America as well, but yes, in Europe too.
No, in Europe. Well, maybe in Europe, but no, in the US, no, in the US there's definitely a limit. There's a bank does not have a blank check to lend out as much money as it wants to. No bank does that in the US.
They have basically free reign for a lot of moments. There used to be a set amount of money a bank needed to own to be able to loan it out. They've removed that. Banks can loan out more money than they actually have, which isn't a problem as long as people pay their how do you call it, monthly payment.
Okay, sorry, I've just found a Investopedia article which talks about this whole issue. Shall I share it?
Yes,
go for
it. You're broadcasting again.
Hang on. It is, sorry, I can't. I'm old. I'm a boomer. Oops. Okay, so I found this article on capital requirements. It deals specifically, and it says there are regulatory standards. Okay, but then I was scrolling down. However, as the 21st century advanced, a system of applying a risk weight to different types of assets allowed banks to hold less capital with total assets. Traditional commercial loans were given a weight of 1. I think it was 4 or 3 earlier. The 1 weight means that for every $1 of commercial loans held on a bank's balance sheet, they would be required to maintain 8 cents of capital.
Yeah, that's a commercial loan, though.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but what this is indicating agrees with Modway's point that it has, the amount of capitalization has been reduced systematically in recent years.
Yeah, but you got to understand about commercial loans. Commercial loans are typically only held for about a year in the first place. So that money is typically paid back and then relent after a year. So I mean, it's
you're making 2 misconceptions here. One, no, it's not only for a year, because you can have long-term commercial loans like that. And secondly, if I only need to have 8 cents,
where? In the US or the UK or the EU?
World.
No. Commercial loans are lent and then relent typically every year. You'd be lucky to have a commercial loan for longer than a year, maybe 2 years at most.
No,
if you're lucky.
You can have about 5 years depending on the bank you make your contract with.
Do you mean a credit line or do you mean an actual loan?
I'm talking about loans.
Yeah, if you're talking about, yeah, those loans are typically only for 12 months. Yeah. Typically only for 12 months because of the high risk.
Correct. Let's assume you're correct. I don't think you are, but let's assume you're correct. For every $1 a bank loans out, it merely needs to have 8 cents of value to cover it. That means that 92% of that dollar has been created out of thin air.
No, it's just that's not what that means. What that means
that is what that means.
No, that's not what that means. It just means that the money hasn't been borrowed yet, and that the money will only be borrowed if the money is not paid back.
What you're now talking about is fractional lending. It's not a problem as long as you pay back your interest and your loan payments.
No, but that's...
But as soon as you default on your loan payments, the bank will have a problem because they don't have the money themselves either.
Think of it this way, all right? So you've got a plot of land. Your plot of land is worth $1 million, right?
Fair enough.
Let's say that the bank that owns that land lends you, basically fronts the money, if you will, to sell that land to another party. Okay? You with me so far?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So when that person takes ownership of that land, does that bank have that $1 million in the bank for that little piece of land that you have?
Okay.
The answer is no. They don't. And they don't have any number of banks do not have the money or the capital in their banks to cover all of the debts that they have.
And therein lies the problem.
And that's how it's always been. And yeah,
no, that's
obviously
not how it's always been. That's the whole problem. That's not how it's always been. And
the lending. If you're talking about
a bank would loan out the money it would have.
If you're talking about commercial lending, if you're talking about lending to, well, no, that's what this is This is what he's talking about.
A bank would loan out the money it had. If a bank didn't have money, it couldn't loan out money.
It's lending out what it's lending. Typically, what happens is a bank is lending out money that it has from other reserves, as opposed to so for example, like let's say that if you look at like the full sheet, so basically like all of the money that the bank has lent out to multiple people over whatever length of time for whatever resources. So it might be personal loans, might be for a car loan, personal loans, whatever the hell it might be, right? You're gonna find that typically most banks are leveraged probably at around 50% of what they already actually have in the bank. So like basically they've lent out around beyond about 50% of what they actually have in the bank.
Yeah,
but the reason that they do that is because they have people there that are making those assessments, those risk assessments, that actually be able to come in and say, okay, well, these are good bets to make for the bank, and they will make those payments back, and they make money for the bank consistently.
Yeah, but it's not true. They don't have a backing of 50% of all the loans they have out there. They simply don't. They don't even have 10% of the money they have loaned out. And therein lies the problem. They're loaning out money they don't actually have, which isn't a problem as long as people pay. But as soon as payment starts faltering, it collapses. And this has happened a few times. And the first two banks that were actually being held.
I mean, that's true for Deutsche Bank or whatever the hell that bank was.
True for Fannie Mac.
Deutsche Bank, the German National Bank.
Actually, the German National. This is true for nearly all international banks.
No. I mean, the problem, as I said, is because banks were pressured to make loans that were not sound investments. They were pressured for political reasons to loan to people in, supposed discriminated communities.
Yes. And here's the thing. Here's this might blow your mind, but they've been doing that the whole time. They've been doing that the whole time.
I won't argue that. I'm just saying this is a fundamental problem. It's like
No, it's the funny thing is that like every time I talk to people about this, they're always like, "Oh, the banks just got suddenly fucking worse out of nowhere." I'm like, "No, the banks have always been leveraged to the fucking hilt because
Thank
they're
you. I
all
was
about
saying this
making money."
earlier. Thank you. I was saying this earlier to Modway that we only think they've got worse.
Well, they have gotten worse because back in the days they weren't allowed to go as far.
But that's not as I said, that's what they were regulated to do, not how they naturally behave.
Look, it. Look, okay, so are you familiar with the London Whale? You heard of the London Whale before?
The what?
The London Whale. Have you heard of the London Whale before?
Not as a specific term in relation to banking.
Yeah. So banks, like I said, banks have always been leveraged as far as they fucking possibly can be. Basically, a bank will lend out as much money as it possibly can.
Yeah.
Based on
greedy. They want money. Yay.
Well, based on their ability to do so. Now, what in our current society we have obviously technology that allows us to speculate.
Trust me, speculation is as old as sin.
And well, yeah, no, there was
House bubble. I will say no more.
You can look up the London Whale. The London Whale.
That's what I was going to look up. Yes, sorry.
The London Whale is basically he's a Chase banker who lost something like it was some ridiculous amount of money. It was like something like
you mean no? Because there was a guy who it was before that there was a guy who broke bearings.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Bearings. Hang on, I'll look it up. There's a guy who destroyed a bank.
No, he was playing with derivatives in.
Yeah. There was a guy, Nick Leeson. This was in the 1995.
Yeah,
and he broke the bank because he lent so much money and accrued so many bad debts. 827 million.
Well, this is 2012. The London
Whale. I'm talking 1995.
Okay, well, let me read you the article. The trader known as the London Whale lost $6.2 billion for J.P. Morgan Chase in 2012.
Well, all I can say is, what the fuck were J.P. Morgan Chase not learning the lesson of Barings Bank in 1995?
Well, what he was doing, and I was actually working for that bank at the time.
Yeah.
What he was doing is he was playing with derivatives. Mm-hmm. Basically, he was basically playing on the market with these algorithm bullshit fucking crap.
Yeah.
And he managed to lose $6 billion, and then he had to explain to the bank, like, where did all that money go? And the thing is that because of the derivatives that he was playing with, he didn't even know.
No,
and we still don't know where that money went.
Yeah,
because it just seeped out into the market.
Well, because that is the fundamental problem with money markets. No money is created; it just gets transferred from one person to another. I'm going to send you a link. This is to an article on Nick Leeson, because you'll probably find this is similar. It's just much older.
Well, the point that I'm making is that when we're looking at banks, right? Yes, they absolutely, all of the money that you put into the bank, right? They are leveraging that 100% of the time.
Yeah, and they are gambling with your money, not their own.
Yes, because when they fail, we pay, and when they gain
for themselves. Yep. And then when they lose, oh shit, sorry.
But they're not. But here's the thing, though, is that they're not gambling with borrowed money, right? So now, when a bank does that,
yes, they are.
They are, but
the money they have is the money that has been deposited.
Yeah, that's not borrowed money, though.
Well, it's borrowed to them.
They're not working off of you. You literally can't do that.
No, the deposits are money they have borrowed that has been entrusted to them. It's not their own money.
They have to. Okay. I forget the. There's a regulation for it. I forget the letter of it in the U.S. anyway. I don't know how it works in the EU, to be honest with you. But
well, no, you can't say the EU. The UK has its own financial regulations.
Yeah, whatever the hell it is. But like in the U.S., a lender or a bank cannot start playing in money that it has borrowed from either the Fed.
No. But the money that is deposited is not theirs.
No, it is not theirs. Of course, it's not theirs. But that's
what I'm saying.
But when you deposit money into the bank, you're agreeing to that. That's actually part. That's actually part of the T&Cs. Like if you put money into a bank,
yes, but it's not their money, and therefore, as I said, they are not gambling with their own money. You introduced borrowed from that, but I never said borrowed. I said they're not gambling with their own money.
What? Well, who would own it? The bank would own it?
No, sorry. I merely made a statement that banks don't gamble with their own money. They gamble with the depositors' money.
Yeah.
So as a banker, the banker has money. They are not risking themselves. They are risking the depositor. That was my point.
They're not even doing that because we have, I just said that, we have insurance, which...
Yeah, but you're conflating what I said with them borrowing. And I'm not talking about borrowing. I'm talking about deposits.
Well, okay.
You're roboting again, Mycroft.
God damn.
But yeah, the problem is that banks are basically letting
parasites.
Well, yes.
Sorry, I don't like banks.
No, me neither. And this is why I can still remember, because I worked in the financial business a little bit myself. I used to have a financial advisory company.
Oh, cool.
Well, it's a one-man company, so that doesn't mean much. But the funny thing was that I could still remember that people were actually talking about how the government needed to bail out banks, and from the very first day, I was continuously against it. Banks need not be saved. If a bank needs to be saved, that basically shows that it has no right to exist.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, that's why we have FDIC insurance now. So basically, we had that problem, and the way that we solved that is you're insured up to a particular dollar amount of investments with a particular bank. So now you don't actually have to worry about whether your bank is going to be able to fucking fix your shit or not.
Until the whole economy collapses and it's all not for it.
Well...
But the thing is that in the Netherlands, your money is safe up to 100,000. Everything beyond that isn't. When you give it to banks, the problem is banks can speculate with money they don't actually have. They can loan out money that they don't actually have, which isn't a problem as long as people pay back, but it becomes a problem as soon as people don't.
Do you mean that they're able to play with money that they actually have by deposit?
I'm sorry, mate. You're roboting. not following what you're saying.
It's still roboting.
Yeah, it's not a very good connection, sadly. Sorry.
All right. Fix it. I'll be right back. Yeah.
I don't understand Ludicrous Leprechaun's last comment to me. The was called Modwayne's Muller. Or is that Muller?
I have no idea.
Oh, right. The company was called Modwayne's Muller. Muller being a British term for money.
Ah, right. No, that's not what it was called.
No, it was a joke.
I didn't even bother giving it a name, to be honest. It's kind of funny. I worked as a financial advisor for several insurance companies and a few banks. And it's kind of funny because I could actually talk to people and I could arrange their mortgages for them the way they wanted it. But because I was an independent, what happened was a lot of people would come to me and then I'd, show them all the different ways they could do it and the different banks they could go to. And if they would then let me fix it for them, I would get some money from the banks because the banks pay me for getting them people to join up with them. But what do these people do? You show them what the best way is, and then they go to the bank to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any difference for them because they don't get any money back, or it's not cheaper for them to do that. But I don't get paid. That's the downside.
No. But then that's like shopping these days. You go into a shop and you try something out, and then you go home and buy it for like 25% less on the internet.
Yeah. Which
sadly, I mean, sadly, this is a economy in flux. Ludicrous legends. I was suggesting to Ludicrous that he should change career into, branding or something. I couldn't think of a word at the time when I wrote PR. And he said, Ludicrous Legends, which is itself a great example.
Shouldn't it then be Legends of Leprechaun?
No. Legends. Legends meaning what you call something.
Yes, I understand, John.
Now, and he's ludicrous. It's Ludicrous Legends. I think that's perfect.
John, do me a favor.
Yeah.
Abbreviate Legends of Leprechaun for me.
Yeah. Okay, I see your point. But yes, no, I think you definitely have a point with that one. Yes.
See, I do have my moments.
You do. That was a very good one. Yes. But so, far be it from me to deny your humour.
No, I'm trying to do some shit in.
No.
Yeah, no. Trying to do some stuff with mines, which doesn't.
No, he said he still has a patent for League of Leprechauns, which is the same abbreviation.
League of Leprechauns. No, that's not the same.
No, but it's still LOL.
It's still LOL. True that. And Ludicrous, I grant you complete rights of Legends of Leprechaun.
Welcome back, Michael.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Welcome back.
No problem, mate. Technical difficulties will ensue.
But at the same time, I am going to say we're not going to make it a lot longer considering the time.
Yeah, it has been 2 hours, which is
and
a good run. A good run.
Yeah, it's been a very good run.
Well, at least they made it back for the end of it.
True that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic, and we might not completely agree. But
well,
yeah, I understand that you worked at a bank. I worked as an independent financial advisor, so I kind of do have a little bit of a view of things as well.
I studied economics, and it put me off the whole lot.
Yeah. Well,
you know what the great thing about money is?
Having it.
Nobody actually knows how any of that shit works. To be honest with you.
When you say nobody.
Yeah, that's not
well.
Most people.
Some people do.
People.
Some people do.
And the people who claim to know that shit works only know some strange, idealized version that has no bearing, no relationship to reality.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
No. If you actually listen to economists, they actually base their whole reasoning on absurd assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are ludicrous. Economists are full of crap. It is essentially wetting your finger and holding it up to the wind and going, I think this is going to happen.
Well, this is the funny thing. This is why I like Austrian economics. And
I do too, actually. Quite a lot.
I'm not a fan of Keynesian economics. Austrian economics at least admit that, you know what, I might not know things, but I think this is what's going to happen. Whereas Keynesian is kind of like, no, this is going to happen, and they've been proven wrong.
Well, it's not. Keynesian economics isn't just this is what's going to happen. It's this is what we're going to make happen.
Make it happen, yeah.
But even then, they're still wrong.
Oh, I know, but they're wrong in thinking you can direct things that way.
If you wanna blow your own minds out, go look up modern monetary theory. It will.
Do I have to? It sounds like cancer.
Please do. It'll.
Oh, you
it'll
hate me that much? I'm sorry. I apologize. Whatever sins I have committed, I apologize. Do not make me read modern monetary economics.
It's Keynes on AIDS, basically. It's monetary and monetary theory.
Keynes was shit enough as it was, but then was Friedman. So,
well, think of it this before we end. Monetary. What is it? Modern monetary theory is basically the idea that you can lend money because to any extreme because
it's social justice economics.
No, because we don't base our economy on we don't base our money on any sort of like actual we don't base it on gold, so we can the concept of money is not real. Simply
it's SJW economics. It's SJW economics. Money is what we think it should be.
It's the idea that you can lend as much money as you want. You can lend out as much without and you can print as much money as you want without there being any sort of consequences, no inflation. And MMT actually has all of these crazy ideas behind how you can, stop there from being any sort of like issues with inflation.
Guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you real fast. I need a fast bio break. I'll be right back.
Albert Speer. Do you know Albert Speer?
What, the Nazi?
Yeah, the Nazi. Okay, so he was the economic genius behind the Nazis' economic policy, right? They had a 5-year plan. It wasn't sustainable, and they had to keep conquering countries and confiscating their natural assets in order to maintain it. The point is, that is what you've just described reminds me of.
Yeah, no, I was having an argument with somebody earlier about it. Yeah, MMT is like this new concept that basically is stating that you can lend as much money as you possibly want, and there's no consequence to that. Simply because
it's based on logic, facts, evidence.
It's based on the idea. It's based on the idea that because money is not based on a particular physical object anymore.
Yeah, it's social justice economics. It really is. Ooh, unicorns and rainbows.
Kind of.
No, I mean, seriously. I mean, yes, there is a this is what we're talking about with bank capitalization, right? The exact limit of bank capitalization ratio is questionable. But it's still rooted in the fact that you needed a relationship between what you lend them and your capitalization. What they're saying is, no, don't be silly. That's just for idiots. We'll just lend what we want, and it doesn't matter. That is based
okay, so
on anything.
Here's the overview. Let me read these 5 off to you. Cannot default on debt dominated in its own currency. So there's no default, right?
Yeah, people so far up their own arses they don't know left from right, if you ask me.
Yeah, the problem with MMT, like straight down, is that it does not account for time. So like if you just don't assume
reality.
Well, if you just assume that time doesn't exist, then MMT makes sense. Basically.
Yeah, but time does exist, and people are morons. Yeah.
Yeah, but which is one of those. The general problem with it is that like if the U.S. never had to contend with another nation ever again, we could probably get away with MMT.
But it does.
But we do.
But it does, and therefore, what are you talking about?
Okay,
and this is a fundamental problem. It's like all the social justice bollocks is, if we lived in this perfect world, that'll never happen. X. Yeah, well, we do live in the real world. We have to cope with other people and consequences. So what's your argument?
Right. Well, here's number 4 is can control demand pull inflation by taxation and bond issuance. So if we just tax enough, or we just issue enough bonds, then we can deal with the inflation that will come from the demand pull.
That is awful thinking.
Well, but here's the thing: if you just have enough people to issue bonds to, and you have enough people to tax, then it'll work out. What's the problem?
No, you do not control spending through tax.
Well,
this is a fundamental problem. We have this whole bullshit with the carbon tax, right? And in the UK, we have this concept that they would raise the duty on fuel, car fuel, okay, above the rate of inflation. And that would somehow magically reduce people's travel. Bollocks. Why? Because the vast majority of travel is for work. People have to work to earn and live. They can't reduce it. It has a lower limit. Just thinking that raising taxes merely deprives people of disposable income and puts it into the government's hands. It doesn't reduce travel or the consumption of fuel.
Here's another one that I really like. Does not need to compete with private sector for scarce savings by issuing bonds.
Oh, for goodness sake.
It's a brilliant method. See, this is what we call neo-Keynesianism. It's basically when Keynes went off the fucking rails, and we just basically were like, oh, you know what? We could just fucking print as much money as we want. All we have to do is just issue more bonds and tax more, and then everything will be fucking fine. And
nothing will be worth anything. The economy will crash, and we're all in the greater shit than we started with.
Yeah. That's only a problem if you think that inflation is a negative thing.
Which, well, if you ignore inflation, you're just like, well,
and reality, if reality didn't exist,
that's tomorrow's problem. Let's just keep blowing that off. Yeah.
No, it's like
that's the pain of our current financial system. And therefore, they're okay with inflation. Inflation to them is important because it makes sure that the value of things grows, even though the value of money doesn't.
Yeah, see, this is the funny thing is that it really does come down to greed when you think about it. Like the Austrian model is all about sustainability. But the problem with the sustainability is that the growth is slow. And people get greedy.
But growth, and that's why bankers and financial moguls are all in favor of inflation, because it favors the rich. It favors the growth perspective and the wealth creation. Whereas Austrian version is more like, no, growth is a natural thing, and therefore it should be incremental. It should be slow.
No, but the point is, it shouldn't be influenced by government.
I think the easiest way to put this is that the Austrian model says earn what you earn the money that you need to actually pay for the things that you want.
Yeah.
And then every other model out there, it's just like, let me lend you the money. Please let me lend you the money.
You know,
let me let you.
I've lived my whole life by the Austrian model. The only debt I've ever had is my mortgage, and that was based upon an asset that could be redeemed.
Yeah.
I've never borrowed money, not once. I've never had a loan.
Well, I'm not that smart, obviously, but
the Austrian model still has an allowance for lending. Obviously, like you can still borrow money.
No, I'm just saying I've lived that way. You save up and buy, not borrow and buy.
Yeah.
Well, when you when you borrow money, what you're doing is you're betting against your future, right? It's essentially what you're doing when you borrow money.
But it's also inefficient.
But there's such a thing as a safe bet and an unsafe bet. And there's a difference. There's a big difference
I appreciate that. The trouble is that there are a lot of people looking to leverage other people into assuming something is a safe bet when in fact it is an unsafe bet. And unless you're prepared to invest serious time and energy, you will be suckered.
Sure. But see, this is the reason that, like, I don't know about you guys, but like in the US we have bankruptcy.
We have bankruptcy, and it's a fucking con.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's the thing is that you still have that option if you
get
in.
My wife worked for a company, right? Literally, she turned up one day, and the company was like shut down. It was bankrupt. In 6 months, this guy who owned it, who had gone bankrupt, set up a new company. It is a con.
Well, it's a get out of jail free card, basically.
Yeah, it's a con. It's a con. I'm sorry. If you owe money, you owe money. You know, you shouldn't be able to set up a business, rack up a shitload of debts, and then just say, "Hey, it failed. I'm going to wipe it all off. Fuck everybody, and start again." There need to be consequences.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, like for business bankruptcies, sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's a con.
I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, really.
I can only talk to the experiences I have of it, that it is a con, that people, and I've heard this a lot in the United Kingdom, that people set up businesses, they go bankrupt, they leave people with having defaulted on the debt, then they start all over again. And to me, that's called criminal.
Well, I mean, you're always at a risk of a default. Do you know how many?
No, I'm talking about people who have a habit, a pattern.
Well, yeah, if you're
going bankrupt, set up a company.
Yeah, if you're
go bankrupt.
Yeah, if you're abusing the system, obviously, but like most businesses actually
will be abused. That's a problem.
Most businesses fail within the first 3 years.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying any abuse that can happen will happen. Because there will be somebody who sees the abuse and does it. Therefore, the one role of government is to protect its people. And you protect people by stopping abusers from abusing.
Fair enough. Right.
And therefore, if you have a bankruptcy system which enables repeated abuse, it is bullshit.
So should we just all just like blame the banks for everything? I think that's a good idea.
I blame the government.
Blame the banks. I mean, yes, I blame the banks, but they can only do it because the politicians allow them to. So in the end, yes, what the banks are doing is massively fail-prone, to speak silently like that.
There is a network of shady backroom deals and undue influence against the general.
It's not the bankers.
Well, I mean, like if you're talking about, well, I mean, if we're talking about like larger corporations, sure. I mean, I've heard of the golden parachute before. I know how that works.
Hey, trust me, I work for a company, and the chief executive essentially destroyed the company with some very unsound investments, and he had a very nice golden parachute. Thank you very much. Shareholders were left with literally nothing, but he was all right.
Well, what do you want me to tell you? That's capitalism. All right.
Yeah. No. I don't want you to tell you anything, but if that's capitalism, capitalism can go fuck itself.
But the thing is, that isn't actually. That's not really what capitalism is.
It's what capitalism has become, but it shouldn't have.
Has become. Fair enough, but it's not what capitalism was supposed to be, and that's the thing. And this is what I meant earlier as well. Banks weren't allowed to loan out too much money. They had to have a certain amount of money within their own holds to be able to loan it out. But by removing that, you are giving these banks way too much power. Now, is this something that we should blame the banks for? Yeah, sure, why not? But who gave them that power? Because they didn't have it at first.
The European Central Bank? The International Monetary Fund?
Well, the central banks and the politicians did. And
the wealthy create institutions to protect the wealthy. That is how the world works, sadly.
Yep.
Well, the whole idea is to keep the game going, dude.
Yeah, I mean, but the game for the wealthy.
Yes.
Well, the game encompasses everyone else too, though.
No, it's not. It is distinctly biased in or weighted. What's the word with it? Loaded in certain directions. You might get lucky, but your odds are unfairly diminished.
Yeah, but I will say this, that the wonderful thing about capitalism is just that it is extremely forgiving. The same golden parachute that we're talking about here is the same thing that allows you to basically wipe out all of your debts. Now you're gonna have to wait 7 years typically after that to like get your shit together.
And this is what I'm saying, because it's not 7 years. And that's when it becomes a problem. If it is 7 years, yes, exactly. That means there are consequences, and that is fine. But you see, here's the thing, okay? So you seem to agree with me, because I argue that corporations are just the inevitable consequence of capitalism. People disagree with me. But I would then ask, when does a business under capitalism become a corporation? What's the line? How do you differentiate? Because I would say you can't. They are just very big, very successful, dominant.
Well, it's typically by the business filing, but...
No, but what I'm saying is that if you start a business... Look, Bill Gates started a business. He bought the license for MS-DOS off a company, sold it to IBM, and thus Microsoft was bought. Microsoft are clearly a massive corporation. What happened in between that changed one to the other than just the way
we could probably figure that out, but typically the way that it works is that you go from an LLC
No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is you're a company trading, you grow, eventually you're called a corporation. But my point is there is nothing inherently different about one to the other, just scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point.
Okay.
But a lot of people would say, no, corporatism isn't capitalism. Yes, it is.
Well, it's
yeah, but that's not really the. I mean, yeah, sure. You can you're eventually gonna hopefully become a corporation if you're running a business. But I mean, that's not.
Yeah, but people complain about corporatism as if it's distinct from capitalism, and my argument is it's not. It's the same thing, just as an inevitable consequence of growth.
Who's arguing that corporatism is separate from capitalism, though?
Lots of people I talk to.
Okay.
Well, in all fairness, there's a difference between capitalism and corporatism.
So what do you, when you say corporatism, what do you, I mean?
I don't know, because people talk about it as if it's a different thing, and I see corporations as just the epitome of capitalism.
It becomes a problem when the governments help them sustain their position.
Okay, so when you say corporatism, you mean like corporate, like lobbyists, like going into the government and like helping out the corporations to continue to exist, even though they shouldn't, through the failures that they have. Is that the idea?
There is that, but what's more important is they basically block competition.
Yeah. And that's when
it's a free market, and a free market needs competition.
Well, and you know what though? That's when the silly ass liberals are supposed to come in and break up corporations. But yeah, nobody likes it when that happens.
I don't care that. I'm not saying corporations should be broken up, but it should be allowed to fail. At this point in time, big corporations have a lot of protections from governments to stop competition from happening. That is a problem.
Yeah, and that would be that's what I would consider a market failure. And I think that if you can't look, you're not gonna be able to stop a corporation from doing everything within its power to continue to exist,
or act in its fate, in its own interest, irrespective of what that means to other people, because that's natural human behavior. And that's the point. I am not arguing against the inevitable behavior of corporations. I merely argue that it is the inevitable consequence of capitalism, that some companies in some markets will become so large and influential they can distort the market in their own interest, because doing so is natural human behavior.
Then that's why we have liberals to come in and say that they need to break up particular markets, or
I'm not convinced breaking up is necessarily the solution.
No, I don't think
we can be more creative.
I don't think companies should be broken up. What I do believe is that companies should be able to compete, or should be allowed to compete.
Yeah, but some markets do not allow for it, and not necessarily because of any wrongdoing by companies engaged in it.
No, it's not the companies themselves, but our protection laws now. For example, if we look at the pharma industry, the protections granted to companies when they create certain medicine.
You mean patent laws?
Patent laws is a very good one, in all fairness. I mean, I understand the need for patency, but
you should get Alicia in, because she hates it.
No, I can understand it for a period of time, depending, of course, depending on what you're asking a patent for. Because let's be honest.
No, but here's the problem. Okay, so we now have a situation where it is quite clear that pharmaceutical industries will favour non-curative solutions that maintain a long-term revenue stream over much cheaper, simpler, curative solutions, because there's no money in it for them.
Well, there's not enough money. That's nuance it a little bit. But yes. But this is interesting, and what I find more interesting is that governments are actually on board with the pharmaceutical companies, and it gets this stupid that there are people who will actually say, well, but pharmaceutical companies invest a lot of money in finding cures, etc., etc.
In not finding cures.
Well, it's even worse. Most of the money going into research is funded.
Yeah.
Not even their own money. But after they, with their funded money, and this is something, for example, and I know this happened in the Netherlands, a lot of research goes on in their own companies, like they do their own stuff, but a lot of it goes on in universities as well, as projects. And this is done by government money and by private money off of other people other than the company. But when a result is given, they will get a very long protection of said product. And because of that, healthcare prices, medication prices, are through the roof.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we are not even looking into it. And there is a very simple answer to prove that this is the case. Is there a simple answer to prove that this is the case? Yes. Look at paracetamol. One of the very few medicines out there that has absolutely no protection.
Mm-hmm.
It's by far the cheapest medicine out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it is effective. People like to joke how terrible it is. It is a fucking effective.
It's terrible if you take too much.
Well,
is it paracetamol? Is that
paracetamol?
acetaminophen?
It's I don't know the American English name for it, but I can.
I think we call it. Yeah.
But it's paracetamol. If you overdose, you die a slow, very painful, and unpreventable death.
Well, yeah, you have to take a lot. I mean, we're not
no. I'm just saying, but that is what people have against paracetamol. Is that when you overdose really, really badly.
Yeah, in English it's also called paracetamol, so I don't know the American name for it, sorry.
Raven says Panadol.
Panadol? Panadol?
I have no idea.
Me neither.
No, I know paracetamol is, I know what you're talking about. Paracetamol. I'm pretty sure that's acetaminophen.
It's a drug. I don't know.
It's a drug. I don't care much beyond that. I mean, I know a little bit about healthcare, but I don't know a lot about...
Yeah, that's Tylenol.
Acetaminophen.
Yeah.
That's acetaminophen. It's
but the thing is,
Tylenol. It's Tylenol.
It's been known for a very long time, and it's open to the public. Everyone that wants to create it can create it. And yeah, it's terrible if people abuse it. I mean, Tuck, I agree with you on that, but that's true for everything. But I mean, when you go to the shop and you buy a package of paracetamol, most of the money you spend goes into the packaging, not in the medication. But if you then go for other medications that are still protected, you are paying easily hundreds of percentages on top of the price.
But I mean, it's complicated. Ibuprofen.
Ibuprofen is something else, though.
No. I know it's something else. But ibuprofen, I don't know what they would call that in America, if they call it anything different. But you can buy the own brand in.
Yeah, we call it ibuprofen.
Ibuprofen. Yeah, that's very different.
Or aspirin.
No, it's not aspirin.
No, aspirin's of something else.
Well,
but you buy that. You can go to the supermarket and buy their own brand, and it is actually very cheap. Not that different from paracetamol.
Yeah.
But you can also buy branded versions that are heavily advertised for ridiculous prices, and yet they are the same product.
Yeah.
They even have branded ibuprofen for this and ibuprofen for that, and they're still all the same product.
Yeah.
It's just marketing.
But if we look at, for example, and this is something I made a video about a few years ago, there are certain there's a lot of medication out there that is being sold to us at incredible prices. And there was a biochemist of a Dutch university who looked into it, and he could make certain medications 95% cheaper than that it's being sold for, and still make a wealthy profit of at least 70%. 17, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Which 17 seems to be a normal earning rate.
Obviously, he's not greedy enough to work in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes, but I mean, at 95% of the cost it's being sold and still making a profit.
Well, you hear of these drugs. I don't know which drugs, but you hear of drugs, and like you can buy them in third world countries for a reasonable amount, and then you come to third world countries, and they are like, say, $15 to $500.
No, the difference is even bigger. I think it's the age cocktail, because India doesn't care about European and Western world copyright laws, so or patent laws, so they basically ignore it. And the treatment for HIV/AIDS costs about €3,000 per month. But when you get the stuff in India, it's about €13. 13.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, that's an overhead of 1,000 really. Well, no, not 1,000. 300 to 500%.
Well, that's why I didn't try and calculate it, because too many beers.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, it's amazing if we look at how much protectionism has created an industry where prices are going through the roof, and it only happens because of protectionism.
Yeah, and as I said, if you allow an opportunity for somebody to exploit a situation, somebody will exploit a situation.
Yeah. And this is why this is why I have a problem with corporatism. I'm not blaming the corporations, because they're using the tools that the governments has given them, even though the governments have given them because of their interference. But the fact is that governments have given them. How stupid is it that a company can actually raise prices on their medication at 2-3 times?
No, there was a famous case a couple of years ago, that guy in America, and he bought a patent on some drug and raised the price by like 100-fold or something. Just insane.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the funny thing is, he got arrested and he got convicted, and everyone was like, see, the system works. Yeah, but he didn't get convicted on that, because that was completely legal.
Mm-hmm.
People kind of ignore the fact that that then was completely legal.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, my argument to that is just open up the competition. As long as other companies can start providing the same pills or whatever, and granted that you're given the option from a doctor to pursue off-brand, then great. Question is are we gonna allow the regulations to drop to allow that to happen? I can tell you back, my grandfather told this story once about insurance, and they used to have a doctor that would come out to his house anytime something would come up, and it was very rare that they would actually have to do this, so they never really had to pay for the doctor, right? But every now and then they had to have him come out. And then in his later years in life, insurance became a thing. Health insurance became a thing. And, his view on it was that as soon as you make insurance a thing, people are going to start trying to use the doctor more often than they actually need to. That's going to drive up costs. That's going to drive up the insurance costs. That's going to make all healthcare more expensive. He made all of these arguments, and the really funny thing is now that I'm looking at it, it's just kind of like, God damn, he was fucking right.
No,
Like
the thing is, the reason why prices has gone up is not because people use it more. The main reason why prices has gone up is because, and this is true, for example, in the Netherlands, but this is true in most of the Western world where they have single-payer healthcare. There's a lot of money in the insurance companies, and the pharma industries recognize this. Therefore, they reduced their production, and because of reducing their production, there is a higher demand than supply, so their prices have gone up amazingly. And because of the protections granted by the government for these companies to do so, they can ask what the hell they want, and insurance companies will pay it because they have to. So instead of actually making things cheaper, it made things more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but again, if the insurance companies hadn't been around, would it have been more expensive or less expensive, do you think?
It's not based on the insurance companies, it's based on the producers. Because there were always insurance companies. But you had more private insurance companies than you have now, because healthcare in more and more countries, healthcare has become single payer issue instead of private insurance company thingy. The problem isn't so much the insurance company. The problem is the immoral behavior of the pharmaceutical industries.
Yeah, but
to make this happen.
Right. But what drove the cost of the drugs up? Exactly.
The fact that they can ask more money for it.
But why?
They lowered production because they know by lowering production you create a false sense.
Well, it's not just that. If you have a patent, you have a monopoly on supply.
Yeah.
You also have a monopoly on demand if you have
on a drug. Which though? Because here's the thing: there's because here's the thing is that those drugs. There's not a single drug out there on the market that cannot be replicated. There's even like the most expensive cancer drugs that they have out there, the cancer cocktails, they have off-market versions of them now. I mean, like there's no drug out there that is just privately owned. Like not name one though. That doesn't because
the drug itself not, but the way it works. Let's say, how do you call those thingies? The EpiPens.
Yeah, there's soft market EpiPens too. Yeah, there are. The EpiPens, yeah, the anti-allergic reaction pens or whatever the hell. Yeah, there's off market versions of those as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but how expensive are they?
In comparison to the quote-unquote EpiPens?
Yes.
Off the top of my head, I don't fucking know. But yeah, no, there are EpiPens that are not off market. Like, look, I can find one for you right now.
And they're still about 100 euros or more. Even though we're talking about 50 cents of epinephrine and €2.50 for an auto-injector, so let's say €2.50 production cost, and they're being sold for 100 at least. Why? Because they can. Yeah. Because they know that even the off-market ones.
That is the market. That is a pure market. You sell for what you can gain, not what. But the cost of a product has nothing to do with the price of the product.
The problem is that even the off-market ones or the cheap branded ones still usually come from the same companies, because they're the only one allowed to produce them. And therein lies the problem.
Well, I just found one for like $30, but okay.
Well, okay, that's good that you saw one from $30, but as I said, production-wise, €2.50. So let's say $3.
Yeah.
So
but here's the thing, okay? No, but here's the thing, okay? We're all using computers, right?
Yeah.
The whole cost.
there's
No. The whole cost argument is meaningless in software, because the cost of distribution of something sorry, my brain's gone. Too many beers. The cost of distribution of software of bits and bytes is negligible. So so there is no direct connection between the cost of production and the cost of sale. However, the cost to the company isn't the cost of physical production. The cost of the company involves a lot more, and it's the same with the drugs. So it's not as simple as saying I can produce this for X, because you have to do the research, develop, and it's complicated. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get you. Well, I mean, I'm actually really surprised at the EpiPen fucking shooting up in cost. Why did it do that? In 2017, it just shot the hell up?
Yeah,
why?
You know that. Why? Because they can.
That's the
whole. And why can't they? Because they're protected. Now, therein lies the problem. And this is why, for example, socialized medicine is a problem, because you force everyone to be insured, which means that there's a large pot of money, but at the same time you're protecting the producers so they can choose to produce less, which will then increase the price of the products they did produce. So you can't have socialized on one side where you force everyone to pay in and then say, oh, well, but the free market will take care of it, and then take away the one thing that makes a free market free by protecting the companies by saying, okay, you know what? You're the only one who's allowed to make this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a free market, is it?
It's not.
You've got patents.
So therein lies the problem.
I mean, the solution supposedly is that people can make products under license.
Yeah.
Which means that you provide a competition of supply while also giving a level of protection to the investment.
Or just say, okay, you know what? You have a new medicine. You have a period of time that you're the only one who can.
Yeah, that's what a patent is.
Yeah, and that patent is for like 5 years max.
So this is like kind of like an off question. Is there a black market for the EpiPen?
There's a black market for all drugs, and it usually comes from China, and it's usually not the same product, shall we say.
India does make good products, though. I mean, there is also
China. I say China sells counterfeits that are not actually the real deal.
Sell counterfeits. India basically makes the products. They just simply don't care. That's, for example, why Indian products are not in Europe or in the Western world, because they don't care about our patent laws. They still produce things. They basically make the same thing, but sell it cheaper. When it comes to medicines, by the way, not about everything, but when it comes to medicine. And this is the example of the AIDS drugs. In Africa, they're using Indian AIDS medication, not American. Why? $3,000 per treatment per month, or 13. But other than that, they're the same. And this is the funny thing, strange thing. I don't know how to say this. By undercutting the market the way India does, they are actually creating a cheaper healthcare in India than we are having in the Western world. For example, it's cheaper for an American. If an American needs open heart surgery, it's cheaper to book a holiday for 2.5 months go to India for 2.5 months, have your surgery there, recuperate there, and then go back home. Because the quality of the medicine and the healthcare is basically the same.
Well, no, we do that here in Arizona too. Like a lot of people will, for expensive but unnecessary procedures, they'll go across the border to Mexico, to Tijuana, and they'll get it done there instead.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's for expensive, non-necessary, but this is true for expensive, necessary ones as well. The American healthcare system is amongst the most expensive in the world.
Yeah, for specialized care, absolutely, yeah.
And then funnily enough, sorry, Modway. Funnily enough, Alicia claims that per head, Utah is amongst the cheapest in the Western world.
Well, I have to look into that, but I didn't see
it.
Well,
you should talk to her because she's the one who has a view on this. I'm just passing on what she has told me.
We could talk about that, but from what I've seen, but I haven't looked at the different states. I've looked at America as a country. From what I've seen, America is the most expensive Western world country when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah, if you don't have insurance. If you have insurance, it's extremely cheap and you get extremely great care. Like I can tell you that.
That's not really true. It's not extremely cheap because it's still being paid for. It's being paid incrementally by your insurance, which is okay. In the Netherlands we have insurance too.
Yeah, private insurance and private insurance. I can tell you how much.
Mycroft, I'm not looking at how it's being paid. I'm looking at what's being paid.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, like, okay, so in the U.S., if I have to go, the best insurance I ever had, which was just some basic ass insurance from the company I was working for. Basically, if anything ever happened to me, the highest deductible that I was going to ever have to pay was somewhere around like $250. But that's like if my heart exploded.
I understand, Mycroft, but that's not what I'm talking about. But you're talking about what it would cost you as a patient. I'm not talking about what it would cost you as a patient. I'm talking about if a hospital does something, how much does the hospital demand to be paid? And whether it demands it from the individual or from a company, that doesn't matter. I'm looking at the price they put in as cost.
Yeah, well,
from second.
That's already actually been corrected in the United States because I don't know if you're aware of this, but we've just recently, because of our God Emperor, now all prices actually have to be published. From hospitals, so all of that is up on the table now.
So you go in, you get a price list. I fancy.
You can actually, yeah, you can.
It'll cost me.
Well, no, the
sorry,
price,
I'm just.
That's
20 past
the
one,
thing,
and
though.
I'll have beers.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that is actually going to drive costs down eventually because people are going to be able to compare costs now.
But that's the thing. I haven't researched it recently. I agree to that. I did it when I was making my.
Oh, it happened like 2 months ago. It's not it. So, damn.
I made the video 3 years ago, and even then there were. I assume there still are cheap hospitals in America. Hospitals that try to lower the cost of whatever they do.
There are some, yeah.
And funny enough, I know this of a few hospitals. I think they were in California, where the government actually prohibits these private hospitals to procure certain medical equipment because they undercut the big hospitals so much that these big hospitals asked protection from the governments, and they got it.
Well,
actually in favor of more expensive healthcare.
The big problem is the issue is that it basically works the same way the schools do. So basically, like a school will basically be able to say, okay, we're going to bill out this much for tuition, right? And then the the state or the federal government will say, okay, well, we'll cover X amount of this, and they'll do it by percentage, right? So they'll cover, and so the school will just continually like push up the cost. Healthcare does the same thing. So like if you're not aware, if you go into a hospital and you don't have insurance and you're some jackass off the fucking street, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to put a little piece of paper in front of you that it's from Access. Access is like basically like free insurance. They're going to have you fill that out. Once you do that, then you're going to pay like a little bit. You'll get a bill, right? But it's going to be a small portion of that. It's like a state insurance that will typically come from. It's provided by the state or the federal government. I don't remember which, but you're not going to pay the full bill, right? And then all of that gets written off to the government. But because of that, the hospitals and also because of the insurance itself, they have been inflating their prices ridiculously for the last I don't know, like how old's my grandfather, like fucking 80, 90 years. It's been going on. Well,
sorry,
he's dead now.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding because my father's older than that and still alive.
120. I don't know how long it's been. It's been a while. It's been a while. Whatever. It's been a while. Like ever since this has been going on, the hospitals have been inflating the prices, and it works exactly the same way that the schools do. It's just basically like they keep inflating the prices. And yeah, I see what you're saying. Like we don't see the cost. Like the end user does not see the cost. Like me, the guy that actually has to pay for that shit, like, or the guy that's actually like using the service or whatever, I don't see that cost.
Insurance has been argued to be a scam.
But the insurance, but then the thing is that eventually it is the write-off to the government and then to the taxpayer. So
somebody pays. This is a problem. Somebody always pays, and the worst is we started off talking about the minimum wage, right? So here's my problem with not having a minimum wage is this. In a country, I can only talk about the UK, we have benefits for people who are on low incomes. That is, if you earn too little, you're at work full time, but you earn too little, you can apply to the government and get a top up. What that does is it means the taxpayer subsidizes private profit.
How do you feel about a $20 minimum wage?
No. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if you want to employ somebody and you employ them below the ability of them to live, and then the taxpayer makes up the shortfall, you are allowing a private company to make profits at taxpayer expense. This is the other side of the argument, because somebody always paid. That's my point. And it's not to say do this or do that, because it's a complicated situation.
People, I do enjoy this talk. I really do. It's 2:30 already. This is why we're going to call it quits.
Yeah, you were supposed to check out like an hour ago. What happened?
Yeah, you tried.
I tried, and I do find the topic interesting as well. Never let it be said that I'm a stickler for the time, but at a certain point in time, I really have to say, you know,
yeah, a 3-hour stream really is quite an achievement.
Yeah, and then nobody's going to rewatch this. Let's be honest.
Oh, I don't know. I can think of one person.
Really?
I will. I'm going to want to watch it. Absolutely.
Not rewatch it, but I can think of somebody watching it.
All right, okay.
I know. I have. In fact, funnily enough, Real Raven. Yeah, it's only 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. Well, today, tomorrow.
Let him end the stream. Come on. Shh.
No. Anna said it's only 10:30 a.m. and that's tomorrow.
Love you. I really do. Shut the fuck up. This is why we're going to call it quits. Anyway, Mycroft, you want to have anything to end the stream with?
Shill.
No. Vote Republican, please. That's all.
We can't. You're the only American left.
Okay. That's all I got. That's all I got.
Time zones are magic indeed. Anyway, you got anything to want to end it with, John?
Yeah, as if.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to say thank you all. Oh, thank you all for watching. We did get sidetracked a bit. We did start about minimum wage and all that, and we ended up with healthcare. That's how it goes sometimes. I'd like to thank you all for coming.
Vote right to Marx.
Vote right to the Marx, yes. Well,
I wish I could, Anatak. Right now in the UK, that is not possible.
Yeah, not just in the UK. That's the truth about... Nah, that's... Yeah, no, actually, it is the truth. Even the people... The parties people call right-wing in Europe, most of them aren't. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to say bye-bye to you all. I have